You pick up your phone to check one notification. Just one. 20 minutes later, you are still scrolling. You do not remember deciding to keep scrolling. You did not plan to be here this long. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet feeling has been building the entire time. A feeling that something about this is not quite right. You enjoyed it, and yet you also feel a little bit worse than when you started. This feeling is incredibly common. Millions of people experience it every single day, often multiple times a day. You open an app because you want to. You enjoy parts of what you see. And yet somehow, after closing it, you feel slightly drained, slightly anxious, or slightly empty in a way you cannot quite explain. For a long time, people assumed this feeling was simply a personal failing, a lack of self-control, a sign that you should just put your phone down and try harder. But the truth is far more interesting and far more unsettling. Social media platforms are not neutral spaces you happen to overuse. They are carefully engineered systems designed by teams of psychologists, neuroscientists, and behavioral experts to keep you exactly where you are. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is publicly documented. Former employees of major technology companies have spoken openly about the techniques used. Patents exist describing these systems in technical detail. The psychology being used is not hidden. It is simply invisible to the people experiencing it, which is exactly how it is designed to work. To understand why social media feels the way it does, we need to start with one of the most powerful psychological principles ever discovered. It comes from a researcher named B.F. Skinner, who studied how rewards shape behavior using experiments with animals in the 1950s. Skinner placed animals in a box with a lever. Pressing the lever sometimes delivered a food reward. He discovered something remarkable. If the lever delivered a reward every single time, the animal would press it occasionally, whenever it felt hungry. But if the lever delivered a reward unpredictably, sometimes yes, sometimes no, on no fixed pattern, the animal would press that lever obsessively, far more than when rewards were guaranteed. This is called variable ratio reinforcement, and it is widely considered one of the most powerful behavioral conditioning patterns ever discovered. Predictable rewards create predictable behavior. Unpredictable rewards create compulsive behavior. The uncertainty itself becomes the addictive ingredient, more powerful than the reward itself. This exact principle is the foundation of how casino slot machines work. You do not know if the next pull will win. That uncertainty keeps you pulling far longer than if you knew you would win every fifth try. Slot machines are, by design, one of the most psychologically engineered products ever created to maximize compulsive engagement. Now think about your social media feed. Every time you scroll, you do not know what you are going to see next. Maybe it is something boring. Maybe it is something funny. Maybe it is something that makes you feel a strong emotion. The reward is unpredictable, exactly like a slot machine. Your thumb pulling down to refresh is functionally identical to a hand pulling a casino lever. This is not an accidental similarity. Multiple former designers from major tech companies have publicly stated that slot machine psychology was directly studied and intentionally applied when building social media feeds. The pull to refresh gesture itself was reportedly inspired specifically by slot machine mechanics. Let us talk about notifications next because they are doing something equally calculated. Every notification you receive triggers a small release of dopamine in your brain, not necessarily because of what the notification says, but because of the anticipation of what it might say. Your brain releases dopamine in anticipation of reward, not only upon receiving the reward itself. This means the moment before you check a notification is often more neurologically stimulating than the notification itself. Platforms know this. This is why notification badges are designed in bright red, a color proven to draw attention and trigger urgency far more effectively than neutral colors like blue or gray. Even the small number displayed on a notification badge is psychologically engineered. Studies on numerical framing show that unread counts create a sense of incompleteness that the human brain is strongly motivated to resolve. Seeing a small red circle with a number on it activates the same psychological discomfort as an unfinished task. This connects to something called the Zeigarnik effect, named after a psychologist who discovered that people remember unfinished tasks far more vividly than completed ones. An unread notification count is, psychologically speaking, an unfinished task. Your brain will keep nagging you about it until you check it, regardless of how unimportant the actual content turns out to be. Now let us talk about the infinite scroll. Before infinite scroll existed, websites used pagination. You would read a page, then click a button to see more. That click created a natural pause. A small moment where you consciously decided whether to continue or stop. Infinite scroll removes that pause entirely. There is no natural stopping point. No moment where your brain is prompted to ask, should I continue? The content simply keeps flowing, seamlessly, infinitely, with zero friction between one piece of content and the next. The person who originally designed infinite scroll has publicly stated he regrets creating it, citing concerns about how much time people now lose to it. This removal of natural stopping points is a deliberate design philosophy that exists across nearly every major platform. Every barrier between you and more content has been carefully studied and systematically removed. Loading times are minimized. Transitions are smooth. The path of least resistance always leads to staying, never to leaving. Now let us talk about something that explains why you often feel worse after scrolling, even when individual pieces of content made you smile. It is called social comparison theory, and it was developed by psychologist Leon Festinger decades before social media even existed. Festinger's theory states that humans have an innate drive to evaluate themselves by comparing against others. This is not a modern phenomenon. It is a deeply ancient psychological mechanism that likely helped our ancestors assess their status and resources within small social groups. But here is the problem. Our brains evolved to make these comparisons within small groups of perhaps 50 to 150 people, the typical size of an ancient human community. Social media exposes us to curated highlights from thousands, sometimes millions, of people simultaneously. Your ancient comparison mechanism was never designed to process this volume. It was built for occasionally noticing that someone in your tribe found more food than you that week. It was not built to process a constant, never-ending stream of curated success, beauty, and achievement from an effectively infinite number of people. And critically, what you are seeing is almost never an accurate representation of anyone's actual life. Social media content is heavily curated. People post their best moments, their most flattering photos, their biggest achievements. Studies on social media usage consistently link heavy use with increased feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and depression, precisely because of this comparison mechanism running constantly in the background. Even when you know intellectually that what you are seeing is curated and unrealistic, the comparison mechanism in your brain does not fully care. It evolved long before the concept of careful curation existed. It treats what it sees as roughly real and reacts emotionally accordingly, regardless of what your conscious mind understands about the situation. There is also something happening with engagement algorithms specifically that deserves attention. Most major platforms use machine learning systems specifically optimized to maximize one metric, time spent on the platform, or engagement, defined as likes, comments, and shares. These algorithms have discovered, through enormous amounts of data, that content triggering strong emotional reactions, particularly anger, outrage, fear, and anxiety, generates significantly higher engagement than neutral or calm content. The algorithm does not understand emotions. It simply learns what keeps people clicking, scrolling, and commenting longer. This creates a system where emotionally charged content is systematically promoted, regardless of whether it makes you feel good. The algorithm is not trying to make you happy. It is trying to maximize engagement. And outrage, fear, and anxiety happen to be extremely effective at generating engagement, even though they generally make people feel worse. This explains a strange paradox many people notice: feeling worse after spending time on a platform, despite finding individual pieces of content interesting or entertaining in the moment. You were engaged the entire time. Engagement was the goal. Your well-being was simply never the metric being optimized for. Let us also talk about something called intermittent social validation, which involves likes, comments, and shares specifically. When you post something, you do not know how many people will respond or when. This uncertainty triggers the exact same variable reward psychology as the slot machine mechanism we discussed earlier. Checking back repeatedly to see how a post is performing is not a personality flaw. It is a predictable psychological response to an unpredictable social reward, delivered through a system specifically designed around principles known to maximize compulsive checking behavior. There is also a concept called FOMO, or fear of missing out, which social media has dramatically amplified. Before constant connectivity, you simply would not know what you were missing while not present. Now, social media provides a continuous, real-time stream of everything happening without you everywhere all the time. This constant visibility into what you are missing creates persistent low-level anxiety that did not meaningfully exist for most of human history. Ancient humans worried about missing events within their immediate physical community. Modern humans are exposed to a constant feed of experiences happening across an entire planet, virtually all of which they are not part of. Now let us consider sleep, because this is one of the most measurable and well-documented effects of social media usage. Blue light emitted by screens suppresses melatonin production, the hormone responsible for making you feel sleepy. This alone delays your body's natural transition into sleep. But the psychological engagement is arguably even more disruptive than the light itself. Scrolling through emotionally engaging or stimulating content right before bed keeps your nervous system in an activated state precisely when it should be winding down. This combination of light exposure and psychological stimulation is strongly linked to poor sleep quality and shorter sleep duration in numerous research studies. There is one more mechanism worth understanding, and it might be the most important one. It is called the hedonic treadmill, a psychological concept describing how humans rapidly adapt to positive experiences, requiring increasingly larger stimulation to achieve the same level of satisfaction over time. The first notification of the day feels genuinely good. The 50th notification of the same day barely registers. Your brain adapts quickly to whatever stimulation level it regularly receives, which means platforms must continuously increase engagement to produce the same emotional response they once achieved more easily. This is why content has become increasingly fast-paced, increasingly attention-grabbing, and increasingly extreme over the years across nearly every major platform. It is not simply changing trends. It is the hedonic treadmill in action, requiring ever-escalating stimulation just to maintain the same baseline level of engagement and reward. None of this means social media is entirely negative or that connection through these platforms is meaningless. Real relationships form. Real communities exist. Real value genuinely happens through these tools. The issue is not that social media is purely bad. The issue is that it was specifically engineered using powerful psychological principles to maximize time spent, often at the direct expense of how you actually feel afterward. Understanding these mechanisms does not automatically make you immune to them. Variable reward schedules, dopamine anticipation, social comparison, and engagement-optimized algorithms work on a neurological level that conscious awareness alone cannot fully override. But understanding does change something important. It removes the shame. This is not a personal failure of willpower. This is a carefully engineered system working exactly as intended. Some of the very engineers and designers who built these systems have since spoken publicly about their concerns, describing what they built as deliberately addictive by design. Several have changed careers, advocated for ethical design reform, or developed tools specifically intended to help people use technology more intentionally. The people who built the system are, in many cases, the same people now warning everyone about it. So why does social media feel so wrong even when you enjoy it? Because enjoyment was never actually the goal. Engagement was the goal. And an entire field of applied psychology, originally developed to understand behavior in laboratory animals, has been carefully repurposed and deployed at a massive scale, aimed directly at the oldest and most predictable parts of the human brain. You are not weak for feeling this way. You are simply human, interacting with a system specifically built to understand humans better than most humans understand themselves.